Hello, I'm Christi Friesen, and today we're going to talk about making molds. Many of you have probably wondered about how you would make a mold and how you would use it in your work. Many of you know that I'm a polymer clay artist, so the molds we're going to make are specifically for use in polymer clay. But the neat thing about molds is you can use them with any kind of product that you're playing with. Paper clay, resins, just all kinds of stuff, epoxy clays, metal clays, ceramic clays, who knows what you'll come up with. Anyway, today let's play a bit with some two-part mold making material. First, I'm going to show you what we're going to use today so that you know what kind of materials you ought to have on hand. First thing is something to make a mold of. Now this can be any number of things. You might want a texture mold, so you've got a piece of material that you really love the thick texture of, or a piece of bark or something like that. I find vintage things like buttons and filigree bits are to be really wonderful. This is a really fancy little filigree bit I found somewhere along the way. It will make a fantastic mold. An old glass button also makes a wonderful mold. Different things like that are great. And don't be afraid to try with the unexpected. This is a piece of braid that you can get at a fabric store that will make a lovely little texture mold as well. So first of all, gather your stuff that you want to mold. Now you need some mold making material, duh. So we're going to play with a two-part silicone mold. Now you see this is two colors. You don't have to have pink and white. Other colors are perfectly acceptable. There is no color that's better. However, you do want to look for a mold making material that is a two-part silicone mold. There's other mold materials out there. Some of them are more liquid. They all have their wonderful properties, but today we're going to talk about this paste-like product that you might like. You can find it at a number of places. Conveniently, I happen to carry some on my store. So if you're looking for some and can't find any, or you just want to try the stuff that I've used because I love it, here's what you're looking for. I get it in a 5-pack, a 3-pack, and a, I'm not sure if I'm going to like it, 1-pack. And they're all available on my website, which is www.christifriesen.com. Simple. Okay, the other thing that you might want to use besides something to mold with, is a material that you can place the object to be molded on to make sure that the mold stays where it belongs. I'm going to use ultralight clay. Today it's just a polymer clay, but you can use scrap clay as well. If you don't have any scrap clay around, or all the colors you have are too nice to waste on a mold bottom, try some of that ultralight. Okay, you gathered your stuff? You ready to make a mold? I am. Let's see what we can do. Okay, let's make a mold of this fun thing. Now remember I mentioned the ultralight. Ultralight makes such a wonderful base for your molded material. When you cut it open, it's very gooey like this, like a marshmallow, but that's what makes it so nice, is things can press into it and have a lot of give, but still be very flexible and firm. So it's a wonderful combination. So all I did was chop up a bit of my mold making material here, flatten it out a bit with a roller or with your hands, whatever works, and then I'm going to take my thing to be molded and press it right in. Now the reason why you got to do this is because I've got a lot of holes in here. Now even something that was solid like this I would recommend, because you've got all these edges, and if you just put this edge flat down on the paper, who knows if that mold material might sneak in around the edges. But if you take it and press it into your clay like this, you can embed your piece to be molded slightly into your base, and it's going to hold it nice. It's going to prevent the mold silicone material from getting in and around and through in all those icky places, which we don't want. Okay, so we got it all set. We're ready. Now we're going to take our mold material. And remember I mentioned that it's a two-part mold material. They're usually two different colors so you can keep them apart. And all you're going to do is take the mold material out and mix them together, 2 equal parts. Now I have some additional mold material I'm going to add because it's a pretty big thing to be molded, and I want to make sure that I've got plenty of mold material. But I'm just grabbing both halves. You don't have to worry, this is a harmless substance. Obviously I would recommend you wash your hands afterwards, and don't touch your face and things like that, just for safety's sake. But it's not anything that's going to harm you. If you prefer, you can use gloves, but it tends to stick a lot to gloves. I use a material sometimes called Instead a Glove, which is a barrier for your skin and lets the mold oiliness, as you can see, not get into your skin if that bothers you at all. But generally speaking, I just wipe it on somebody's pants as they pass by and it works just fine. This particular mold material has quite a long mix time. Some materials you have to work very quickly. They start to cure in 1 minute, so you have to work fast. You've got about 5 minutes for this before it starts to harden. So what I'm doing is I'm thoroughly mixing it with fingertips. If you prefer, you can also use the palms of your hand by rolling it and folding it over and over again. What you're wanting to do is you want to so thoroughly mix those two halves together so that there's absolutely no streaks showing it all. You see that? Now you also see how nice and gooey this is. That means it's going to push and mold itself all around, even the smallest little details. Now I give this just a little roll in my hand so I've got it all compact, and I'm going to go on the top and press down. Some people make a blob of the mold material and they push the object in. I don't like that as much because it has a tendency to kind of sink into the mold material, which lips around it, and then you've got a mold that's got weird edges. Which, you know, who wants weird edges, right? So I am just like pushing this all the way around, little at a time, going from the top, making sure I don't get too thin in places, trying to make sure I've got the whole piece covered so that there's a nice bit of thickness. I would say a minimum of about 1/8 of an inch all the way around the whole surface, just like that. All right. Now, once you've got it just like that, you set it aside to dry. This particular mold material has about a 20-minute cure time. That means that's how long it takes for this to be firm enough so that you can peel the material away from what's underneath. You can hasten the process if you put a little bit of heat, set your oven to about 150 degrees, pop this in, and it will be done in 5 minutes. Which is kind of nice. Other materials have different time frames, so read you the directions, but that one works really well. Now, once you're done, you've got a nice flexible mold, and I would have just like popped this out. Doesn't cause any problem to your original. Your original will be just fine to use, and you can see the flexibility of this mold. That's another reason why I like silicone, but the main reason why this is the best mold material on the planet is because nothing sticks to this. You get a piece of your clay. In fact, let's take some of this green clay. I'll show you right off the bat. And I'm going to roll it out just a bit. Get that clay warm and soft in my hands. This is polymer clay. I use Primo. It's one of my favorite clays of all time because it's such a good all-purpose clay. So that's the one that I use for almost everything. And I am going to just take a little bit more of this off because I don't want this whole mold. Just because you have a big mold doesn't mean you have to use all of it. And now I'm going to press this polymer clay into part of this mold. Now I'm just kind of pressing it firmly and holding it because, like I said, nothing sticks to silicone, which means if I don't pay attention, it's going to start popping out every time I'm trying to press it, which can get aggravating because you don't always have as deep of an impression as you want when that happens. Once I've pressed it in firmly enough to where I'm satisfied with it, and you see I just took part of it, then I can gently peel it away from the mold. You don't want to start ripping and torquing this a lot because this stuff does rip, and you don't want that to happen. At least I don't think you do. And see what a nice little impression you get of that piece. Now, the fun thing about polymer is that while this is still wet, you can manipulate this. Maybe you wanted this to have some curve to it. Maybe you wanted it to be more elongated. Maybe you wanted it to be whippledy-doodle. So you can do that. And if you have a little bit of mica powder handy, which of course you know I do, I'm going to dab a little bit of it on my fingertip and just touch it over the surface of this clay while the clay is wet. And look at how that just brings up all of the details of your mold. Ain't that sweet, baby? And you can go from there. You can roll this thing up. You can manipulate it a bit. If you're very gentle with it, you've got lots of play on a mold. It can really increase the things that you're able to do with clay. Both of these pieces here used a mold. This one I did that same little trick where I tweaked it and everything else. Then I covered it with a Swelligan metal coating, added a Swelligan patina to it, and created the look of an old bronze piece. This one just has several bits of molded material that are laid onto another polymer base. So you got some options on that one. Now, one other thing that you can do with molds is make it a little bit more controlled. So let's play with that real quick. This mold here is one of the molds that you can get on my website. It's a poppy that I created. And this is something you can do too. If you make something out of polymer or wood carving or whatever it is you're into, and you really like it and you want more of them, you can make a mold of that original so that you have them over and over and over again. I'm going to take a bit of yellow. and press it in the center area, because you can put more than one color clay in a mold. So I'm going to hold that down there. Now you see how all these dots are all the way around the outer edges? Some of those dots I can put like a full bit of clay in there, but others I may only want to put a tiny little dot of clay just to go straight in where that dot is, so that it can just be molded along with the pattern that I already have. A bit more painstaking, but it makes for a really fun design when you're done. Now I'm not going to go nuts with that because I don't want to take forever while you watch me make tiny little dots out of yellow clay, because that sounds really boring. But I am going to now take a color for the petals and press that in the mold right on top. All right, so we've got some blue polymer clay, and I'm going to press it right on top. Now hold it firmly because it's going to want to come up. Remember I told you, so don't let it. Now as you get to the outside edge, you've got some choices. When you have a big pile of clay like this, you can use a blade to cut it away, or you can just have it pendant style. But one thing I like to do is I like to press that clay into the edges and press it away from the edge of the mold. You see what I'm doing is I'm pushing the clay all in and around that mold, forcing it where it should go. Take your time. You don't have to be anywhere for a while, so just play with this until you can get it into all the cracks and crevices, and you'd be amazed at how much that little bit of clay will go. Now I won't do the whole thing, but you can see what I'm doing here is I'm pulling away from those edges so that I can see the edge of the mold. This will make sure that I don't have to use my blade and cut everything, and it'll make for a very clean edge. Should have very little cleanup to do after that. So once you've done the whole mold as you wish, then when you peel that baby out, ooh, magic! Look at how fun is that. Now we have all those nice clean edges, and all you've got to do at this point is come take your tool and just press any area that looks a little moldy on the edge and make it look a little bit more sculpted, so you can see how nice that is. And again, like I mentioned with molds, you've got flexibility. If you want those petals to stand up like that, all you've got to do is tweak them around a bit. If you want some of that powder on that area of the gold, you just add it. I added a lot of antiquing with paint to mine at the end, which you can do. That's a subject for another little video bit, but for now I just want to show you how flexible these molds are. And one last thing is, if you weren't sold on the whole concept of using silicone molds already, these things are heat resistant. So I could take my mold, press the clay in, put it in the oven at 275 degrees, which is what you normally would bake your polymer clay, take it back out, leave it in for about 10-15 minutes, take it back out, let it cool completely, pop that mold out, and it would be absolutely perfect. No distortion, no twisting, no tweaking. This works especially good for things like faces. If you've ever made a mold of a face and you pulled it out and he looks suddenly like a Salvador Dali piece because his eyes are drooping and his nose is all over the place, that's something that happens as you're distorting your mold by taking the clay out. Just pop that little mold in the oven, let it harden, pop it out, and then a little bit of liquid clay, and it will be ready to attach to other clays. Okay, so to review, first of all, you want to have a base so that your molded piece will have something to sit on so that your silicone can go on top of it. Silicone is kneaded with your hands till it's completely mixed to one solid color. Then it's pressed on from the top down and let to dry and harden. Once it's hardened, you peel it off, take out your original, and you're ready to play with it. And one last thing, if all that seems like way too much work, you can just go to my website and buy some molds that are already made. Have fun, happy creating!